Then Daddy Paul came to stay with them a while. He was fun and telling about old times in Mississippi and coming to Texas in a covered wagon. He had to sleep with Jay, but he was so small and shriveled up it was no problem. He never hit his head on the roof and cussed like his dad did. Mostly he sat in a big beat-up chair they got just for him, and told stories by the fireplace so he could spit tobacco juice a lot. He got chilly easy, so they made a little fire so that he could look at, even though it was hot weather and the house was all open. He wanted hoe cake cooked in the fire, but Vida laughed and said they didn't have a hoe that big. She cooked him one in an iron spider instead with sweet potatoes in ashes. That pleased him a lot, and they talked about recipes they enjoyed on the home farm outside Tyler. When they mentioned grape pie, Jay told them of the grapevines on the fence up the creek. Vida got all excited and had him take her there that afternoon. She said when they got there, plucking the green marbles fast into a lard can. Green grape pie, I don't know how long it's been, my favorite. And she baked them a real pie. Everybody liked it, but Jay, it was so twisty, sour, sweet, he wanted to stomp his foot and run off every time he took a bite. Since Daddy Paul was there, Vida could get away some. He was gentle and good with babies. Jay and his folks drove to Tyler one weekend to see a colored movie called Robin Hood. Robin Hood was an actor Jay's dad joked about and called Hair Oil Flynn. It was in a real beautiful park place with people in different colored leather clothes laughing and swarming down out of big trees to fight with bows and swords and sticks. But then afterward the lights came on and a man announced a talent contest for girls and women. They came out of the curtains when their names were called and tap danced or sang. One even played a piano at the side, but the one who won the prize was a cute brown-haired girl with red spots on her cheeks and a dress split way down in front. She kept smiling, bending real low, swinging her bare arms and singing about how you made me love you, you dirty dog, and shaking her finger about how she guessed you always noodle or something. All the people yelled and laughed and clapped. His folks did too, and shook their heads and laughed at each other over him. Back home he kept dreaming around about Robin Hood. He went down by the wellspring and cut sweet gum branches to whittle swords and daggers from, and tried to make a bow. He noticed that even the trumpet vine blooms had cut out places at the base just like the notches on the Robin Hood clothes. He found a loose grapevine to swing on across the lane, but the reason it was loose was it was dead. It broke and fell on him, and he went skidding into the draw on pine needles. Another weekend, they went to the big circus in Tyler. It was the biggest, a three-ring circus, his dad said. They went in the afternoon and sat on board bleachers right where they came in. TM said he liked to be by an exit in a crowd of people. They were in the huge tent called the Big Top. Jay never saw so many people just showing off in shiny colored clothes and glittery stuff. He liked the boss man in the top hat and black coat and boots, and the jewel ladies on the elephants, the people on swings up high, and a lady in a pink light way up hanging by her teeth and turning while the ringmaster counted through his trumpet thing. Jay didn't much like the clowns except for the sad-faced one. Of the animals, he liked the elephants a lot, and the galloping horses the ladies stood up on, and the circus ponies. The lions were scary, with the man in a white shirt and boots snapping his whip and waving his chair at them. Right at the end, a man and woman in white helmets and boots and neat puffy pants just came in like they were taking a walk. The ringmaster honored them a lot. He called them Martin and Osa. Right behind them, horses pulled this really big glass wagon with iron bars inside and a great huge gorilla in it. 4 men, also with helmets and puffy pants, walked with it, one at each corner, carrying rifles to guard it as it stopped and moved around, while the ringmaster made a speech about how strong and dangerous this gorilla was and hard to capture in the jungle. Martin and Osa did it, though, and brought it back just for us to see. The huge gorilla didn't pay any attention to anything outside the glass. He looked bored or puzzled and wandered around. All he had was some rubber tires to play with, and once or twice he bent one double. The men with the rifles kept looking at the audience all the time. After the wagon got around the circle, the ring man asked them all to clap real hard for Martin and Osa, and it was over. His dad bought him a little circus whip and some cotton candy for him and Vida that was like eating sweet air and stuck to his cheeks. When they went outside, it was still daylight, and he was blinky, like after the Saturday matinee in Overton. He learned to snap the whip finally and went around snapping it till it came unraveled and he saw it was just twisted paper. Then just before Daddy Pa went back to Tyler, two poor country men came with a mule and a wagon to cut out cross ties to sell. They went into the short-leaf pine grove across the trail with their long saw and two double-bitted axes. Each day they came and went, exchanging a few words with Daddy Pa, who was eager to talk with them. It was like old times, he said. Polite and friendly, they agreed with him that it was hard work, man's work, always had been. He asked how much they got for each tie they chopped out to sell to the railroad. 37 cents, the older man said, 37 cents. Then one day Jay and Daddy Pa saw them come out of the woods early, the older wiry-haired man supporting the younger blonde one. The young man's right boot was bloody with a slash into the instep by a glancing axe blow. They limped up to their wagon and did not come back. Mornings turned chilly after Daddy Pa left. They shut some windows and his dad cut firewood some. T.M. must have kept getting work because he said he might buy a gun he brought home. It was a new-looking single shot with two barrels, one for a .30-30 rifle and one for a 16-gauge shotgun. Jay watched as his dad hung a steel barrel lid way across the creek pasture, then sat and fired at it with a rifle barrel. T.M.'s shoulder jumped back as the barrel lid blanged and the valley roared with the sound. His dad must have decided against it because Jay never saw the gun again. Jay recognized the sign. School would soon start again. His stomach was already a little jumpy, but he hoped to see the Ardell girl, Maybelle, a lot. She had a blonde Dutch boy haircut and peaches and cream complexion and big blue eyes. He was nervous about the bus, though, his first time to ride one to and from school. He wondered if he'd find the right bus, but after the first day, that vanished. He did see Maybelle each morning, or she was ahead of him in the grades and paid him no attention. Only a few country kids rode that bus, so he sat on the bus alone. The nicest time of day was walking up the sandy lane in the morning with chaparral cocks running and stopping on each side of him. And then coming home in the afternoons, no more school. His folks bought an Aladdin mantel lamp with a green glass font for him to study at the table. They learned to keep the wick low at first, then to sprinkle table salt down the chimney to clear the soot off the silk ash mantle when they forgot. Playground life at school never got better. He never had much contact with kids his age when he was growing up. Now he wouldn't even try. The hand walkers were always dominated by the ringleader boys, the merry-go-round dominated by clumps of little girls. It made him dizzy anyway. He didn't care for the slides either. A few spaced trees stood around the schoolyard side. For the rest, it was just pounded dirt and dusty Bermuda grass with the funny flat-needle cedar bushes against the brick school walls. At least these bushes weren't stickery like real cedars. Every schoolyard was like a desert compared to the beautiful places he'd already seen and lived in. Even at its worst, the home farm loomed in his recall like an oasis, and Indian Creek in the Ozarks seemed to be a paradise. Yet the oil field surroundings and the scrubby landscape didn't bother his folks like they did him. They stayed cheerful, well, mostly. And he was startled and puzzled to hear on the steps at recess one morning a young lady teacher take a deep breath and remark to another, "Don't the school grounds just look simply beautiful today?" What had he missed? He whirled and took a careful survey of it all. No, it was just the same. His dad was getting work again. Things seemed to improve. They ate well enough at the Ardell farm, but his dad wanted to be closer to town, or at least to have better transportation. One day he drove in grinning in a strange car, a black two-seater coupe. "I think we got something dependable in this one, Vida," he announced. "Not a speck of rust on her. The used car people gave me a good deal on the old roadster, said it was a collector's item. They know an old boy that collects them." I talked to the man that put this one on the lot. His dad had it, but got too old to drive. Vida seemed doubtful. Well, what year is it, and how much do you owe on it, Ted? It's 35 olds, a good make, and I've got enough work lined up that I won't owe anything in a month or two. Come on and I'll take you for a spin. She laughed and went in to fetch the boys. Jay really liked this car. He'd gotten awfully tired of either crawling across the seat or climbing out of the rumble seat. Since his fall that night near New London, he was always scared to sit next to the passenger door. By late summer, the Billies were bigger and they had moved again, this time back into the very edge of Overton, in a better house at the end of the lane. A big weathered barn signaled that it had been a farm. The house itself was better for them than anything yet in Texas. It was well painted in light buff paint with several rooms. It had front and side porches and an attached utility shed behind. A dirt street ended in a turnaround out front. The nearest neighbor house was some distance off. Jay really liked it here, except for the Billies. His dad sold the nanny goat when they moved, but kept the Billies and put them in the pasture by the barn, where Jay had to feed and water them. Now they were as big as he was. Their idea of fun was to slip up behind him, hook a horn in his pants cuff, and turn him upside down. Just behind the house, a steep slope dropped 30 feet into the flowage of a narrow stream. With Captain for company, Jay explored it. He found minnows and small sunfish, cedar trees, and moss. It was easy to run up and down the low hill on the old wagon track. He borrowed a cloth sieve from the kitchen and scared a nice sunfish into it from its hole under the bank. The whole area was like a small park. One weekend, Jay's dad decided to make it better with a dam for a shallow swimming pool. His dad carried down the few tools he needed, an axe, a drain spade, and a maul. Vida came down with baby Dave and little Matt to watch. Matt played in the water and Jay waited around. His dad went off with the axe to cut some slender sweet gum poles, which he began to lug in and dump heavily nearby. He cut them to length and made stakes from the trimmings. He set to with a drain spade and cut a trench the length of the poles and 2 feet wide. He drove a line of stakes on each side of the trench, then lined the stakes with the poles to make a foot-high wooden wall on each side, and then filled the trench by digging off the stream bank to straighten it and dump the dirt inside. He finished by packing the sod and turf between the poles. From the ditch that he had dug at first. All of this had greatly added to the area of the swimming pool. He put a bridge of poles from the end of the dam over the little stream to the other bank. He finished off the dam by packing big squares of grass turf on top, and then he plugged the narrow stream bed under the bridge with more big turf sections. The pool rose and spread quickly, and water began to flow over the new spillway. Jay's dad fastened a small diving board to the dam, supported by stakes. Jay waded back and forth in the pool. It now came up as far as his rib cage, but not really deep enough to dive into, but he couldn't swim anyway. Just across the pool, on the upstream side, was a small park-like peninsula the stream curved around. Here his dad fixed a hammock he contrived of a woven fence wire stuffed with cedar fronds from 2 big cedars where he hung the hammock. This made a cool and shaded retreat where Jay loved to come, though he never could stay balanced on the stickery hammock. This became Jay's favorite haunt for a while. He spent hours mud crawling, learning to swim in the fetal position. His head underwater, his eyes open to the soft radiance of sunlight down there, while his rump was in the air. Captain was always with him, waiting after the schooling minnows. A rain trapped a few minnows in old cow tracks below the dam, and Captain developed an appetite for them. Jay had some idea of catching 1 or 2 of the minnows to study and feed. When he mentioned this, his dad told him how to make a minnow trap. As he was told, the next day he made one by himself. First, he got a long-neck cola bottle and a fruit jar and stuck the neck of the bottle into the jar until it lodged. An inch above the jar top, he tied a tightly twisted strip of rag, then soaked the strip with kerosene and lit it. When it had almost burned out, he plunged the cola bottle into cold water and a jagged line ran around the glass. All but the neck dropped off. He now had a minnow trap. He pulled out the glass funnel, put some breadcrumbs in the jar, replaced the funnel, and sunk it on its side in the pool's edge. Then he forgot it. This is always a cardinal sin in trapping. When he thought to check it, a whole school of stiff dead minnows was packed into the jar. He was very sad and dumped them out for captain. He did not try again. The school year approached. Again, he was sort of used to Overton, and that made it easier. He was still a little upset. His folks took him to the front and let him out, saying that he was to go in and tell his name. They knew all about him and would enroll him in school. They would come back to pick him up about 3. Then they drove off, and he went slowly up the steps. They did know him about him in the office, and took him down the hall to a classroom. His parents had brought him late, and all the pupils stared at him while the secretary explained to the teacher, who nodded, looked at a slip with his name, and led him to a desk where the boy got up, and everyone had to move back a space to make room. He was told what he would have to bring to school, but that the books were furnished. He did have his tablet and pencil, so he could take part when they did sums and things. It was when they practiced penmanship that he was in trouble. Perched on the high molding above the blackboards were slick vellum squares that bore huge Spencerian script, alphabet letters, and exercises. The pretty teacher stood at the blackboard by her own large examples of slanted lines and ovals and demonstrated, moving her whole arm and even her body and rear. She sternly warned against scribbling with the fingers and then told them to begin. He tried very hard to duplicate the beautiful lines on the board and lost himself in it, so he didn't know what was happening when a voice hissed in his ear. He looked up, startled. His writing hand was seized, yanked open, and struck repeatedly with a wooden ruler. The face of the pretty teacher was twisted and furious. He felt shaken and guilty, but injured unjustly. He glanced around at the studious faces near him, rubbed his aching hand, and tried again. He still couldn't do it. The pencil skated all over. He kept trying and finally worked out a way of faking it that looked like he was moving his arm, but the same grooves from scribbling were on his fingertips when he finished. The teacher came by to check him, stooped, and said, "Well, that's better." He nodded, stared at her wide-eyed, and went on fudging. Lunch was another problem. Some kids ate in the cafeteria while others brought lunches. He had money today, but felt so strange that he couldn't eat and drank only a small bottle of milk. His mom had said she'd fix lunches for him in the future. He got used to most things in time, not all. The electric bells always jangled his nerves. Being a new kid repeatedly at little towns in the oil patch meant he had few or no friends and sort of ran the gauntlet over and over. For some reason, he never forgot his first real introduction. At recess of the second day, he was circling the building when he ran into a clot of a half-dozen boys his age. They seemed to welcome him. The biggest, a blond, grinning boy named Chucky, hailed him as he came up. "You're new, ain't you?" "Yes." "Well, you gotta be initiated then. You want to fight?" "No." Chucky grinned and nodded to someone behind him. A jar in Jay's back knocked him forward to be stopped by Chucky's fist in his face. Then they all ran off. He stumbled blindly up the school steps, holding his bleeding mouth, and found the teacher. She seemed fussy and put out, but took him to a room with a sink and medicine cabinet, wiped off his face, and dabbed something that stung on his cut lip. He even found one friend, or was found by him, a plump boy with fine white skin and silky dark hair. His name was Julian. He had a health condition and was the son of wealthy parents who brought him to school and retrieved him after school. Julian invited Jay to visit him at home after school, promising they would take Jay home later. A routine began in which Julian's folks would arrive to pick them up in their yellow Buick with maroon leather seats. Jay had never been in a car this nice. Its doors closed with a mellow thunking sound, and it was quiet and comfortable. Julian's mother always asked Julian lots of questions about his school day on the short ride home. She was a small, pretty woman with a nice voice and the same fine skin, dark hair, and dark eyes as Julian had. The dad was a big sandy-colored man with crinkles at the eye corners. He never said much, just smiled, nodded, and drove, usually while smoking a nice-smelling cigar. Very soon they would arrive at the house, a buff brick place almost the color of the car, and would park under a side roof, also with buff brick pillars. Inside, Julian would take Jay to show him all his stuff, model kits, stamp collection, and especially his Lionel train set. In a little while, Julian's mom would come to tell Julian, in her sweet musical voice, that it was time to go to the kitchen. "Julian, dear, it's time to drink your Ovaltine." The three of them would go in the kitchen, and Jay would sit at the table while Julian drank his chocolate milk stuff. Because they never offered him any, Jay guessed it must be some kind of medicine. Then it would be time to take Jay home. They would go to the living room with all its heavy drapes at the windows, where Julian's dad would heave himself up from his armchair with his cigar, and they would all get back into the yellow car behind the brick pillars. When the car drew up in the dirt turnaround at Jay's house, he would hop out, tell Julian goodbye, and run to the house, then turn and wave. The car never went fast either way, and he would always see Julian's white hand waving in the back window as it moved off. Now it was getting colder, but they were in this better house, and then they struck a harder spell. Jay's dad sold the billy goats, which did help a little. Then the last of his dad's short jobs ended. That was the week Jay went to the barn after the billies were sold and stepped on a spike in a fallen board. It went through his tennis shoe like it was butter and into the ball of his foot. He yelled, yanked it off, and hobbled to the house. His stepmother was lying down a lot again because she didn't feel good in the mornings. "Go wash it off and drip some kerosene on it. You better soak it in salt water, too." He had to stay home and hobble around on his heel a few days. On the day he returned to school, there was no lunch ready, his usual hard-fried egg muffled in a soggy biscuit. He whined around her bed till she lost patience. "Go get a leftover yeast roll and an onion. That's all we've got." He left and limped off to school. It was a chilly and damp day, but he felt good. He had on a warm tomato red wool sweater, part of the clothes some nice lady brought them. He reached school before the bell. Some of the other kids still milled around on the steps, swinging on the pipe railings and pushing one another off the edge. He passed his enemy, Chucky, the boy who hit him in the mouth that day. Chucky's eyes widened. He straightened up and grinned broadly. "Hey, everybody," he yelled and pointed. "He's wearing my old red sweater, the one Mama gave away. Right there is the hole in the elbow." Jay grabbed the tattered elbow and hopped up the steps. At noon, he took his crumpled brown lunch sack down to the empty boys' toilet and ate what he had, staring at nothing as he sat in the stall. After, he drank at a gummy fountain to counteract the onion. All the pupils were upstairs or outside. Julian was not at school that day. He hobbled home, feeling that things were going all wrong. But when he reached the house, he was surprised to find his dad alone in the kitchen. "Where's Mama?" "Well, she has to be careful. She's still laying down and resting. We need to get some food in the house. You want to go with me out to the farm place by ARP where we lived? I have 4 shells for the old sawed-off blunderbuss. I figure we can get something. If we do, Mama still has flour and lard. She says she'll make us a big game pie." Of course they wanted to go. They trundled along the skinny blacktop to the turnoff between Arp and Overton, then down the dirt road with its cut clay banks and sheared off root wads of oaks to the white farmhouse with its sandstone chimneys. There his dad asked permission, and they rolled down the sandy lane Jay remembered so well. The rail fences still zigzagged along both sides, but no road runners in sight today. Dead cotton stalks on one side and the old watermelon patch weedy on the other. The shingle-roofed tenant house where Vida had cooked hoe cake for Daddy Paul was vacant. They left the car there and walked past the place where Jay had poisoned himself eating green poke leaves. His dad set off warily down into the basin of the creek pasture, moving toward the right, Jay some way behind due to his bad foot. Suddenly a cottontail popped out of bunch grass and circled left. The boom of the shotgun came instantly, and a white belly flashed sideways and lay still. Jay hurried as best he could up to his dad, who held up the limp rabbit, grinned briefly, and waited. "Now," his dad said as he came up, "you carry this rascal, and I'll try to slip up on that mess of blackbirds across the creek." Jay took the heavy rabbit. He felt the departing warmth of its feet and legs and wrinkled his nose at the odor of punctured viscera. His dad aligned himself with some bushes and began a slow crouching advance toward the milling birds, excitedly fluttering and feeding around a large cow patty near the water. Again the suspense, waiting out his dad's pussyfooting approach. Then came the blast and his dad's leap across the stream, frantic motion of snatching flopping bundles of feather and flesh, whacking them against the gun barrels. When Jay reached the spot, 11 limp, glossy grackles lay around. "Well," his dad said happily, "we've got 2 shells left. I can't believe this, son. Let's pile them under this bush and try that slope ahead." They started across a marshy space at the base of a hill studded with a few large pine trees. A fat brown bird whirred up and darted 2 different directions, then sailed behind a big pine as the gun finally went off. "Well, shucks, I don't want to waste my last shell. I sure wasted that one. Take a look, Jay, but I'm pretty sure I missed. That was a timber doodle." "A what, Daddy?" Jay moved gingerly toward the tree base, glancing back. "A timber doodle, a woodcock, is like a big fat jackknife. They're good to eat, but hard to hit. I'm sure I missed, but take a look." In line and 6 feet behind the big pine lay the plump round bird. Jay yelled, picked it up, and brought it downhill, steadying and flexing the long 3-sided bill. His dad turned it over, looked closely, moving his thumb against the feathers, then shook his head and grinned, his gold tooth glinted. "Well, I'll be dogged. I thought I saw a flicker at the last. Just one crazy pellet from this old gun clipped it behind the head. Let's go home." The game pie, like a big cobbler, lasted them a few days until his father got work. He came home grinning. "Well, Vida, at last I've got some good hard field work with Humble Oil, painting derricks by hand. There'll be more in different parts of the field. We'll have to move a lot, but it pays well. At least we can eat." "That's good, because I have to." She gave him one of her looks. He nodded soberly. From then on, things went better. Some did, others not so good. A flood washed out Jay's swimming pool and the dam, logs and all. His dog Captain disappeared. Julian did not come back to school. When he asked, the teacher told him Julian had been taken to a big hospital in Dallas. Jay thought of Julian's white face in the car window when he waved goodbye the last time. "When will he be back?" "Well, we don't know, do we? We'll just have to sit and wait." A few months after Dave was born, his dad took them for a drive in the country. He'd met a nice man at work who had a purebred beagle with a litter of pups old enough to wean. Since they were crossbred with the pointer bird dog across the road, he was giving them away. Jay's dad said with 3 boys now, he thought it was time to make up for losing Captain. Vida said she wasn't sure about taking on another dog, but his dad said that she could do the choosing and she didn't see any she liked. Okay. Jay piped up about Brownie back on the home farm. He said he wished any new dog could be as good as Brownie. Captain was okay and did some funny things, but he never liked him like he did Brownie. His dad agreed that Brownie was really special. He said he thought Brownie had some beagle blood in him, too. When they reached the man's house, he came out and took them in to see the mama dog and puppies in a big shallow box with rags in it. The mama was a pretty dog, marked in black, white, and brown. She had big, appealing eyes and beat her tail a little awkwardly, a little anxiously, as they bent over and handled the grunting, sleepy pups. There were 5 left, and of them, 3 were males. One male was tan with white markings and a white vest. Vida chose him. Not counting the tail, his plump little body was only a foot long. She held him in her lap and stroked his head and back with one finger. He promptly went to sleep. From then on,